Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to be getting into episodes 411 through 413, which will cover manga chapters 517 through 519. And Luffy is discovered by Boa Hancock and will now have to fight for not just only his life, but the lives of his saviors. So, synopsis: Boa Hancock has returned to Amazon Lily, unaware that Luffy is loose on the island. But that soon changes when Luffy accidentally witnesses a secret that she desperately does not want anyone to know. Luffy must then survive a public execution set in motion to keep that secret from getting out. Okay, so let's get into the differences. So the first difference is in the anime, it actually shows a flashback of the kids delivering the handmade dirt statue of Hancock. The next one is the anime has an extra scene of Luffy being chased and then dragged around by that giant fish. In addition, there are more scenes of Luffy running around in the jungle, and also anything pretty much up until he gets to the top of the wall is pretty much added filler as he's being chased around by like Margaret, Kikyo, Sweet Pea, and Aphalandra. Thirdly, the whole chase sequence after Luffy escapes the bath until Luffy gets caught is also filler. As in the manga, as soon as Luffy drops out of the window, it immediately cuts to him being tied up in the arena. So it's kind of like a jump cut. But obviously in the anime, there's this somewhat longer chase sequence where he gets cornered in an alley. And lastly, when Luffy unleashes his Conqueror's Haki for the first time, it's portrayed slightly different in the manga. First off, it seems like the blast from Luffy's Haki seems immediate. Like, it actually immediately knocks people unconscious, where it's like a blast of Haki. Unlike the anime, where it's kind of held for dramatic effect, where everybody just kind of like sits still, and then they start to fall over one by one. Also, similarly, like with Perona back in Thriller Bark, the anime, for some reason, is resistant to showing people foaming at the mouth to indicate they're unconscious. So in the manga, you actually see a bunch of people like foaming at the mouth who basically passed out because of Luffy's strong Haki. And, thinking about it, I think to me, this seems like in the medium of manga, Oda needed a visual shorthand to indicate someone is knocked unconscious, as opposed to like sleeping or being knocked out from, like, say, fatigue. But in the anime, they can actually show it visually, distinctly through motion of people like literally keeling over, where you can't really show that in manga. So maybe perhaps that's why they removed the foaming. I don't know. But yeah, something very interesting. But those were all the differences that I could find. So let's just get into the episodes themselves. This set of episodes starts off with not too much to discuss other than building up Hancock's arrogance and vanity a little, especially with how she knocks over the statue that the kids so like lovingly built for her, saying it's ugly. And I gotta say, that is beyond cold. But at least she didn't do it in front of the kids, so there's a small consolation. Also, another voice cameo here from the main cast is the servant that welcomes Hancock and gives her the emerald is actually voiced by none other than Ikue Otani, the voice actor for Chopper, and also young Sanji as well. So yeah, we get another vocal cameo from another main cast member, as yeah, they're pretty much all missing again still during all this Amazon Lily arc. And like all the other islands we've visited, the culture of an island is very much rooted in a theme, and obviously Amazon Lily is all about snakes. However, what's unique about Amazon Lily compared to what you'd expect from a snake-based society is that they don't just have snakes as pets and have decorations of snakes. The snakes themselves are actually like used as tools and things. And I don't quite know how humane that is, but the snakes appear to be enjoying themselves, or at the very least, they don't seem to be unhappy. We've already seen them being used as bows, as well as propulsion for the ship, and we've also seen it used as a cane by Nyong Grandma, and now we see Hancock's personal companion snake, who we will eventually learn her name is Salome, which apparently is another reference to flowers, specifically to the Narcissus Salome, which is essentially like a giant daffodil from what I understand, which is kind of fitting considering that Salome is a giant snake compared to all the other sort of pet snakes, but Salome is used as a throne for Hancock to sit on as well as being her pet. And then next, there's a bit of a translator's note here that I wanted to mention. When young Granny yells, "Wait, Snake Princess," or "Mate Hebi Hime," after having ordered to have her thrown out, and there's this little pause where in the subtitles it said that Hancock is waiting for her to say please, which kind of works. But what's actually going on here is in Japanese, Hancock is trying to correct Nyong Granny and waiting for her to add the suffix sama, so hebihime sama, which is an honorific suffix you add after addressing someone who is above you in social standing or someone you really want to ingratiate yourself to, or basically use to show some form of respect, to show them that they are above you or superior of you. And this opposed to the standard like san suffix, like Luffy-san, you hear that a lot. And so Hancock wants her to call her Hebihime sama, and she keeps repeating sama to rub it into Nyong Granny's face that she is in fact above her now. Obviously, since we don't really have a kind of an equivalent to that in English, I guess they could have done it sort of like Lord Snake Princess or something like that. Like have Hancock say Lord, like she wants her to add Lord in front of that. I mean, actually, no. Thinking about it now, I think that might have worked better than please, but it doesn't. I mean, honestly, it really doesn't matter. I think it gets the point across that she's basically just trying to rub it in her face that she has a higher status than her. It's also pretty funny though when young Granny asks Hancock why she doesn't answer the Marine's call to arms. She just uses her beauty and cuteness and says, "I'm scared." And even though young Granny knows what's happening, she still almost falls for it because of just how beautiful Hancock really is. And I do get kind of a kick out of that. And it's here we're explicitly told that Hancock is essentially using her Shichibukai status to keep Amazon Lily safe from the outside world. And again, here we see the manipulation and hypocrisy of the Shichibukai and the world government. You could easily argue that if the Marines and the world government actually did their jobs in protecting people, they'd actually just protect Amazon Lily. Then they may not even need to resort to piracy to begin with, but instead they create a system where that's not only necessary, but they also hold this threat over them to get a powerful person like Boa Hancock to do whatever they want. And we also get a reveal that young Granny was actually the previous empress of Amazon Lily, but was branded a traitor for leaving to venture off, which no doubt will play a role in explaining her personality more later on. It is kind of crazy how much disrespect and contempt that Hancock has for a former empress, though, to the point where she throws her out of like a 7-story window. Of course, being a former empress, she's still got it and is still strong enough to land just fine, which is crazy considering how tiny she is and how old she seems. But, I mean, old people in One Piece generally aren't weak. I mean, we've seen plenty of old people between Garp, Rayleigh, now young Granny. Like, all the old people are super strong in One Piece. Also in this scene, we get the first instance of Hancock's now famous quirk where she feels such superiority looking down on people despite her already great height. She has to bend over to an extreme degree to look down upon people even further. And this is honestly one of my favorite running gags for any character in the series. It's so ridiculous, especially with how much there's an air of seriousness and regality to Hancock's personality. Then to see this complete, like, unironic act with no hint of that of just any sort of comedy is freaking hilarious to me. How she's so serious about looking down on people that she bends over backwards so that her head's even further beyond what it would be to look down on people. Every time I crack up seeing this happen. A little bit after this, we get a very interesting scene about the Boa sisters and this elaborate bathing ritual and sort of this exposition dump told to a little girl by one of the Kuja pirates, Ran, about how the sisters were cursed, basically fighting a Medusa-like monster with eyes on their backs that is, if seen, will turn anyone to stone, which is why they can never show their backs. Of course, we will go on to find out that this is completely false when Luffy inadvertently lands in the bath and sees Hancock's back. And that this whole thing is just a cover story to make it seem like it wouldn't be that strange that they're so adamant about people not being able to see their backs for some reason. And I know the answer to this, but I'm sure it's come across a lot of other people's minds too. But like, how, if they're so adamant about keeping their backs hidden, why do they wear so little clothing to cover it up? Like, I mean, Hancock is actually robed, but Marigold and Sandersonia are only wearing a bikini under their capes. Like, you can clearly see their backs if, like, say they were jumping and the capes, like, flapped up. So it's like they don't even bother to hide their backs, I feel like. I mean, I know that their tops do cover their backs, but it just seems like really little clothing still. As mentioned, Luffy ends up falling into the bath by accident and sees Hancock's back. And strangely, we don't see it quite yet, but Luffy seems to recognize whatever it is on her back. I remember at the time when I first read this, I figured it was like a tattoo of some kind, but I didn't know what. I kept thinking maybe it was like Ace's back tattoo of the Whitebeard pirate Jolly Roger, and that's why Luffy recognized it so easily. And maybe she was hiding it because she didn't want to be known that she was part of a male-led pirate crew. But I didn't really put too much credence into that because that seems really ridiculous and it didn't really make sense. But I was just like, what could it possibly be? And seeing as how it's something that they desperately were ashamed of, that they have no choice to eliminate Luffy, Hancock then blasts Luffy with the Mero Mero Melo beam to turn him to stone, to which, funnily enough, Luffy initially mistakes for the Noro Noro beam, which it does sound and look the same, but I also love that Luffy kind of starts slowing himself down on his own in preparation to be hit by the thing. And I love that like very subtle voice acting that Mayumi Tanaka does, where she's slow, like, but it doesn't actually slow down. I thought that was a really genius choice. However, miraculously, Luffy doesn't turn to stone. And I think one of my favorite types of moments in One Piece are when there's this sort of slight break in the characters and they're all just kind of like standing there confused and they tilt their heads to one side, along with the same face that Luffy makes when he was initially shot by NL Thor, and where they first realize that he's immune to the lightning. And that blank stare as he kind of just sucks in his lips. I love that face and reaction so much that is actually something I have been doing in real life ever since the NL thing, where if I'm ever faced with a confusing or weird situation, I will actually just kind of suck my lips in and just tilt my head to one side in confusion. I even do this like at work, like in my professional life too. And I don't know, it's just something that it's at first it started like it started as me being like wanting to copy One Piece, but now it's just like I just do it instinctively. I don't even think about it. It's just part of me now. It's kind of funny. But yeah, I love using this face, either whether it's reactionary or intentionally on my part. And this scene is something very interesting because it brings up all sorts of questions when it comes to Luffy. So, if the beam didn't work, especially after having just seen someone like Hancock nude, does that mean Luffy doesn't have any attraction to Hancock or women in general? I mean, Oda has been pretty clear that he doesn't want to introduce too much romance in the series, especially among the main crew, and certainly not his main character. But Luffy's non-reaction here, and to pretty much, for the most part, most female characters throughout the series, kind of loosely implies or suggests that perhaps Luffy might actually be asexual, as in someone who doesn't experience sexual attraction towards individuals of any gender. But one counter to this is that if you dig back into your memories, you may think of the bath scene from Arabasta, where he, along with everyone else, reacted to Nami's happiness punch. And also, again, if you go back even further, before they get to Arabasta, when they encounter Bonkle, and Bonkle turns into Nami and flashes the crew as Nami, he also has a reaction there too. So what happened to these two, instances? Somebody actually asked this question to Oda in an SBS, and he responded. So kind of to boil it down, apparently Luffy wanted to basically be part of the group, especially with Usopp. Kind of like how little kids want to mimic their friends because they want to seem cool. The exact translated quote from Oda is, quote, "But when he's with Usopp, who's the same age, it's like a kid on a school trip. His bad side comes out. Yeah, both sides of Luffy feel right to me, so the culprit is definitely Usopp." So it sounds like this only happens when Usopp is around. And of course, this sounds like nothing more than an oversight by him, and this is Oda trying to retcon and BS his way out of it. And as for Luffy, whether he's actually asexual is kind of still up for debate, in my opinion, and can really be up to you and how you want to interpret the character. Personally, I think it's not that he's asexual per se, but more so the fact that there are so many more important things on his mind than romance and sex, that those two things are beyond unimportant to him. The way I can kind of sort of relate to this is kind of like the idea of winning the lottery. Like, it's such an impossibility that it's something that most people, I feel like, don't think about all that much or get really excited about on a daily basis. Of course, winning a jackpot is something that everyone would like. So when presented with some random lottery ticket, most people are like, oh, cool. Like, I'm never actually going to win, so I'm not going to get all that excited about it, And I think that's kind of like how Luffy sort of views sex and attraction to somebody. Anyways, getting back to the main story, we also get to see another aspect of Hancock's Metal powers, as she can create physical hearts and fire them as a projectile that can bypass Luffy's rubber body. No doubt, I don't know if the power itself is what allows it to do it, or maybe she is imbuing the hearts with Haki that allows it to penetrate Luffy's sort of rubber powers. But it is interesting how that's also part of her power set. So it seems like the metal like fruit is far more versatile than initially thought, or at least it was for me. And it'll be interesting to see how she actually uses it, because clearly she can use Haki, but I mean, her powers, I don't even know what the extent that this thing could actually be used. I mean, of course, I've seen more of her powers, but even now, I'm still not entirely sure, like, what the limits are to her powers, or how creatively she could actually use her powers, because I have no frame of reference on how a power like this would actually work. Now, once Luffy is captured and in the arena, and like I've always said, this is one of my favorite things, and I love how Luffy draws people in, and Margaret is no different, as she herself is a good person, but here you see why Luffy is so powerful in this regard, and it's actually a really good message, even if it is a bit idealistic. Like, we see that because of how kind and sincere Luffy is, it actually compels Margaret to stand up and do what's right and come to Luffy's aid, even at the potential cost of her own life. And in turn, this then spreads, as seeing Margaret do the right thing out of a sense of compassion and righteousness, it turns out that it compels Sweet Pea and Aphalandra to also come forward and defend now Margaret and Luffy as well. And this right here is the main thesis of Luffy's sort of hidden superpower. It's not so much his literal superpower like a devil fruit or his extreme superhuman strength and endurance. It's Luffy's sincerity and kindness that makes people want to be better and compel them to act. Therein lies kind of the real life message to be taken away here. Now, of course, I realize the real world isn't as cut and dry, and the real world, people are much more complicated. But the general principle here, that small acts of kindness and compassion can spread. If you spread hate, only more hate will spread. But if you spread kindness, that might compel others to see that and inspire them to also do their own acts of kindness, no matter how small of an action it is. And it just spreads and exponentially spreads. And I personally want to live in a reality where that is true, despite how naive and idealistic that it might be. But it is something I feel like we should somewhat strive for. Now, I don't necessarily mean that we should, do performative or virtue signaling like good deeds like you see on a lot of social media these days. I mean, like, just genuinely do nice things for people and hope that the people that are around you, they do nice things. Because as we'll see, this may even turn someone around who's so cynical of the world and holds great prejudice as Hancock herself. However, it does take a bit more convincing for her as she unforgivingly petrifies the three of them as punishment. So, as entertainment and for show, they plan to have Luffy executed via a giant Black Panther. But of course, we all know that's not going to faze Luffy, and it's incredibly satisfying to see Luffy actually get pissed and just knock the Bakura in one hit. But the even more satisfying part is Luffy scolding everyone in that arena, and just when you think that scene can't get any better, Hancock starts to arrogantly declare that she can do anything she wants and it'll always be forgiven no matter what because of how beautiful she is. And Luffy just angrily stares back at her and says, "You're really starting to piss me off." And like, what a freaking boss. Like, it's somehow so satisfying to see someone finally put someone as vain and arrogant as Hancock in her place. It's such a new experience for her. It's actually starting to affect her physically, it seems like. With the Bakura defeated so easily, Hancock realizes she's going to need more firepower and sends her two sisters, Marigold and Sandra Sonia, who are both Zone Devil Fruit users. And appropriately, they're both Hebi Hebi no Mi or Snake Snake Fruit users. Hebi meaning snake in Japanese. And Marigold has the model Cobra, and Sandra Sonia has the model Anaconda. And they're both massive, though, for snakes. Like, but then again, I mean, I guess naturally, just the two of them are both oversized humans, from what I can tell. But Sandra Sonia always kind of stood out to me because she was already snake-like, even in her human form, with like the snake tongue and everything. So maybe she's not even actually human, but some other species altogether. But I don't think this has ever been confirmed, and I'm pretty sure she's just a normal human, just very uniquely snake-like. But yeah, their transformations are huge. Like, they're really big, and I definitely was not expecting that. We also get a bit of insight into the Amazon Lily culture and perception, as they're fairly an isolationist country. They don't have any concept of devil fruits, and Hancock has not made it known what they are, so that she can keep up the facade of mysticism by using it to demonstrate their curse to further perpetuate the narrative to protect what they're hiding on their backs, as Luffy is confused by the crowd's talk of curses and everything when it's clear as day to him that these are devil fruit powers. However, before all the punchy kicky stuff starts happening, Luffy, being the awesome guy he is, calls timeout before the fight begins and carefully takes the petrified three ladies out of bounds to protect them from the ensuing battle. And again here, we see that just by being a caring person, he starts to affect the crowd ever so slightly, and in particular, the other warriors that were with Margaret, like Kikyo and basically everyone in her sort of squad. The build up to this fight is really sweet and satisfying, though, because of just how full of themselves everyone else seems to be, especially Hancock, Sandra Sonia, Marigold, and most of the crowd. Like, seeing people constantly underestimating Luffy is always awesome to see, just because of how easily he turns the tide. However, despite our confidence in Luffy's strength, this fight doesn't start off very well for him, as he gets his ass handed to him because of, yet again, Haki. At this point, it's abundantly clear Haki has multiple purposes and uses, in that it can, in fact, nullify Devil Fruit powers, which is what allowed Rayleigh to touch Kizaru. But also, we see Haki can be used to predict and see the actions of people before they happen. And of course, we've seen this sort of ability before with NL and Isa in Mantra. And this is really cool in that we've now got two confirmations of use of Haki way prior to its formal introduction in Sabaody. First of all, obviously by Shanks and Luffy's flashback, and then with Mantra in Skypiea. Oda has clearly been setting this up since the very beginning, which is quite amazing that he basically sat on and played the long game when it came to a whole second set of powers in this series. And of course, we'll go on to learn so much more about Haki as the series goes on, but I just love how it was built up here. And as Luffy, even with Haki, is still proving to be a nuisance. Like, Hancock wants them to finish off Luffy quickly, and the sisters decide to play dirty and use Margaret as a hostage. And the really messed up part about this whole society starts to rear its ugly head in how entitled they are and how the rest of the citizens just go along with it, cheering for the unjustified execution of their fellow citizens and almost acting like it would be an honor for them. And I don't know about you, but I remember when I was reading this for the first time, my blood was boiling and wanted Luffy to kick their asses so badly because of this. Of course, since this is Oda, we got something far better than that. And Luffy, in his frustration, then unleashes his extreme willpower on the entire arena, silencing everything. And inexplicably, people in the stands start to randomly pass out. Now, where have we seen this before? Yep, this is the exact same thing he did to Duval's Motobalo, and also what Shanks kind of did to the Sea King, just on an uncontrolled, massive level, to the point where it filled an entire stadium. We now know that this is a special type of Haki that only about 1 in a million people possess, called Conqueror's Haki. So before we move on, a bit of a translator's note, because there's a lot with this. There are a lot of names for Conqueror's Haki. So in Japanese, it's called Haoshoku no Haki, which directly translated is color of Conqueror's Haki. Hao or Hasha being the word for supreme leader or conqueror, and Shoku being the word for, like, a counting word for colors or type of colors. So there are some people that actually still call it color of Conqueror's Haki, or you may even see it abbreviated as COC. Now, on the Crunchyroll subs, for some inexplicable reason, they call it Conqueror's Spirit, which isn't wrong because Haki is spirit, but I don't understand why they decided to now translate Haki to spirit when they've actually already used the word Haki and left it as Haki in past translations. It just seems really weird to me. Now, another term you might see for this in the Viz English manga translations, you get an even wordier term as they refer to it as color of the Supreme King Haki. Like, that's also technically correct, but it's so long. But for our purposes, I am going to be referring to this as Conqueror's Haki, as this is how most of the community seems to agree upon how to refer to it. Now, this revelation isn't all that surprising that Luffy possesses something like this, since he seemed to be destined to have it. We also learn here that Hancock has it as well, and no doubt there are a couple other people we've met who have possessed it as well. Of course, Shanks has it, because we've already seen him use it on the Sea King. The introduction of Haki is really exciting, though. I know there's a subset of fans that don't like Haki, or at least have some problems with the way it's used, but I personally think it's great and adds a sorely needed layer of, to the combat outside of who has the better devil fruit, i.e., who has the Logia fruit. Because while it was fun to see Luffy counter Crocodile and Enel naturally through whatever sort of natural resistance that they had, there are some devil fruits like Smoker who just don't really have sort of that innate counter to them that makes sense, or at least aesthetically makes it interesting from a story perspective. So I do actually like the addition of Haki, and I can't wait to get further into the story so that it gets more developed and we can talk about it more. Anyways, this leaves the whole arena, including Hancock, speechless at what they just witnessed, because it seems, despite Hancock herself having Conqueror's Haki, Luffy's Haki was still able to affect her a little bit, showing just how strong Luffy's spirit is. And again, we all knew his spirit or Haki was going to be strong, considering how much willpower Luffy has shown in his battles. And so, with a renewed spirit and seeming strategy to beat the sisters, the episode ends here, and we'll have to wait till the next podcast to get into the finale of this battle and the fallout of it, because you know that Luffy hasn't even used his gears yet, so he's about to turn it up. Although, just before we end here, can I say I'm a little disappointed that they didn't end episode 413 like how chapter 519 ended, with Luffy going into his iconic Gear Second pose and activating it with the steam coming out as he does his menacing smile before he's about to wreck shit. Like that panel in the manga, the way chapter 519 ends, it's essentially ending at the same spot. I don't know why they didn't like cut some of the other stuff to at least make this sit here, or all they needed to do was maybe trim like 3 seconds for him to do this. I don't know why they ended it at such an awkward spot when they had a great cliffhanger ending. But anyways, that's just a small minor nitpick about this. Anyways, if you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment. And if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Check out my Instagram and Twitter account at SunnyGo Podcast for updates of new episodes. And as always, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to listen to my podcast. Just a small mini spoiler section. I don't even know why I'm really doing it because it's really just one small thing, but I do feel like I kind of want to talk about it. But if you're not interested in that, stay safe out there, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye. Alrighty, so the spoiler section, there's really only one thing I wanted to actually talk about, and it's such a minor nitpick, but I feel like it is still warranted to talk about. So, the thing I wanted to talk about was the use of armament haki here. It's clear that they're using armament haki to defend against Luffy's attacks, as well as being able to hit Luffy. However, as we see post time skip, that in order to use armament haki, we see this sort of visual representation of it where whatever limb or body part they're using to attack with, or even weapon, whenever it's imbued with armament haki, it turns black, like this very like steel looking color. We don't see any of that here. Now, I'm assuming the real world reason is because that Oda maybe didn't come up with the idea of having some sort of a visual representation for armament haki. And so that's probably why it's not here. But it is interesting that later on, Oda decided to go all in with black looking armament haki. And I just, yeah, it's very, going back and watching these episodes now, it is very weird not seeing the black. Covering whatever limb, like you'd think like when Sandersonia hits Luffy with her like pointed tail, that spike, that tail would be black, as well as like Marigold's like palm when she deflects Luffy's what is it, the Gomu Gomu no stamp or something like that. But yeah, it is interesting how Oda then, once the post time happens and he sort of, I would assume he reevaluated like how going forward, since Haki is going to be such a big part of the story, that he basically decided to create a visual representation for armament Haki and like coating it in black. I've always been a little indifferent about whether the black was necessary or not. I know there's like some discourse on the internet about like how they don't like the black, but at the same time, I think it's kind of necessary. And also when it especially when it comes to how he designs Gear Fourth, I mean, that would look stupid without the black, because that's the dark coloring around Luffy when he goes into Gear Fourth, whether it's Bound Man or Snake Man. He like that is armament. He's covering his whole body with armament haki, and so without that, he just looks stupid. I wonder. I remember reading like a fan theory or like a fan justification about why it could not, like, why perhaps maybe at this point in the story, at least headcanon wise, why you can't see the black is because since the story is kind of being told from the perspective of Luffy, which it's not really. I mean, because we cut away from Luffy quite often and see stories from other characters' point of views. But in any case, we do see maybe that because Luffy can't recognize Haki yet, that we actually can't see the black coating on the armament Haki. And so maybe that's a reason why. But yeah, I always found that very interesting. Yeah, in any case, that's really just a nitpick and kind of more just me rambling in my head, but that was just kind of a thought. In any case, thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode. See ya.